Yeah, it's a
Cowhide.
cowhide. Yeah, I got the same thing, I think. Yeah.
It's very, yeah, it's, I think it's very important to have, bulls in your office, for a bull
That's
run.
exactly. Be bullish.
Well, I know. Well, I'm happy this all worked out. I think, I just had a realization that I think the people who come on the show of publicly traded companies, when it's approved and they're cool with it, they got the logos and they got the branding. But when it's not approved, it's always, so maybe that's a good tell for my audience that this
That's
is
exactly.
okay with Smith+Nephew for you to be here.
Well, I appreciate you letting me wear a hoodie and some branding, so I appreciate it. Thanks for the informalness of it as well.
Totally. Look, I mean, as a guy who owns a marketing agency, I'm very pro, put your brand out there as much as possible. So,
100%.
well, Craig, thanks so much for coming on the show.
You can't replace part of the brain.
You treat them the same.
Source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the puppets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the $90 billion company. They had help up high, a lot of things. You stayed in medtech
With your host, Omar M. Khatib.
Everybody, welcome back to the show. We got a very special guest today, very excited, which is Craig Gaffin. So Craig is the president for Global Orthopedics over at Smith+Nephew. He got on my radar because I always try and keep an eye on people who are doing great job at not only leadership, but storytelling online. So I saw Craig doing a podcast with a surgeon, and I was like, hey, great, a strategic who's actually, content forward and everything. And then I, followed Craig's profile for some time, and I just said, yeah, I really want to have him on the show. So Craig, thank you so much for coming on the show, and shout out to Gina, by the way, for making this happen too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for following. It's interesting. I didn't go into this wanting to be a social media influencer or make any Wi-Fi money relative to the link content. What ended up happening was we got some feedback both from the channel and also more importantly from our surgeons who had asked to try to get a foot forward and get the story out more about what Smith+Nephew is about and what we're doing. In one of our advisory boards, it was pretty resounding that to start making content and getting out there. And I do like technology, and I think it's an incredible way to communicate all the great things that are happening. So it's worked out really well. My followership is going up. You can't help but look at the clicks and the hits as well. So it's been a really good effort, and I've got a great team there too with Gina and Kate who helped me out in the back.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny, you said the term Wi-Fi money, which I'm very impressed with, because a lot of people in our industry don't know what that is. But when I started my business a few years ago, I was trying to think about like a business model. This is before I had a marketing agency or anything. And one of my buddies who's in the e-com world, he's like, dude, you need to just think about Wi-Fi money. I'm like, what's Wi-Fi money? He's like, oh, like create a digital product and sell it. And just like, you don't have to do fulfillment. Money's just going to show up in your bank account. I'm like, and I don't talk to anybody. I'm like, that sounds amazing.
That's a good gig.
Wi-Fi money is real, but yeah, I will say, like, you definitely have to be a master marketer on the B2C side to make it work. It worked well for me for the first couple of years, but I think I had bigger aspirations, and so we have Wi-Fi money plus now on the business side.
Exactly. Well, you're doing a great job.
So
obviously,
Craig,
you got a great audience, so you're doing well.
I appreciate that. Well, before we get into like sort of your personal background and journey, just for the people who are, let's say, living under a rock or maybe not in orthopedics, but uninitiated, like who is Smith+Nephew in the world of orthopedics, and what are they doing?
Absolutely. So one of the good things about Smith+Nephew here, we're a portfolio company, right? So think of us in 4 different business units. So one is obviously, I've got orthopedics. That's one of the areas. The other, and when you think about orthopedics, that's our hip and knee implant that's enabled by a robotic technology. We also have trauma and extremities, which has been a great growth driver for us. So you think about core trauma, fractures, then we have the shoulder franchise, and then foot and ankle as well. So, the combination of all those orthopedic franchises together is what sits underneath me. Been leading it on a global basis for about a year. Then you also have the other 3, which was sports medicine, right? And I think Smith+Nephew is really well known for our for our sports medicine group. It's a really strong business unit. Obviously, they have instruments and implants for minimally invasive surgery relative to degenerative conditions of shoulder, hip, knee, small joints as well. And more importantly, they've made some really good progress in the area of biologics, obviously with Regeneratin and Cartahil as well. And then you have ENT, which is, obviously your nose and throat, which has been around for a while. And then finally, a real strong driver for us also is our wound business. Our wound business is a really strong pillar for us as an organization, acute and chronic wounds. We have over 18,000 employees, serve over 100 countries. And I think we've been privileged, which I think is the most important piece. We've been privileged to, help and assist 14 million patients over the years as well. So it's a really good luxury to be in a strong portfolio. And to have all these different levers that you can pull as a company.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And by the way, for the audience, we have a lot of people who listen to the show because they're investors or just getting into medtech. This is not financial advice. Craig and I are not financial advisors. We're just two guys on a podcast. But if you're interested, you can look up their ticker. They're on the New York Stock Exchange under SNN and doing really well, like 18% growth year to date. And then on the year over year side, just kind of want to roll this through just for the listeners. Revenue side up almost 6% year over year. Net income is up 117% year over year. Net profit margin up 105% year over year. So again, like as a guy on a podcast who does not give any financial advice, because you should not listen to me about this, everything looks exciting times for you guys. So it's really cool to see that.
It definitely is. I mean, it's definitely exciting times. From our standpoint, we've been fortunate over the last couple of years too. We have a new CEO who came in, and I'll probably touch base on this a little bit later. One of the strengths that he brought in, he brought a lot of discipline and a lot of, I think, the right behavioral change that was needed for this organization to take kind of the next step up. And I think we're, again, continuing to, I wouldn't call it a turnaround. I think it's just, again, about, building the strength of the organization and taking it to the next level. And certainly I've been here for 6 years, and I hope I'm here for a long, long time because I feel really good about where we're going as not only orthopedics, but as an organization.
I love that you say that because, again, like I think for an established brand like a Smith+Nephew, turnaround is not the right term. And again, like there's nothing, you guys weren't like doing terrible that there was a turnaround, but I think the more important thing is that now in 2025, there's so many things have changed in the marketplace with how physicians adopt technology, how investors like to invest. And so seeing companies like Smith+Nephew take a much more proactive and bold move into how do we tell this Smith+Nephew story to the market? How do we engage surgeons? How do we help more patients? I think is really, really great. And again, just, seeing you put out content online is just kind of like just really the tip of the iceberg. But again, one of the reasons why, aside from, you're a great leader, but also I've noticed a lot from Smith+Nephew, and that's why I was like, it makes sense to have you on.
Quick commercial break for marketing leaders and sales leaders. I don't have to tell you this, but it's worth reiterating that the time clinicians have to meet with medical reps is limited. You know this and feel this. It's been a challenge for med device sellers for decades. Now, with the rising workloads and patient care demands, clinicians' times are shrinking even more. And the window for your sellers and your sales team to meet with these clinicians consists of pretty much just minutes in a busy hospital hallway. The reality is your sellers have to make every second count or someone else will. They must be concise, they got to be efficient, and use highly relevant information to make the most out of these brief interactions. Showpad is all about focusing your sellers on the art of selling, which is about building trust and relationships. And while there's science, the Showpad solution handles the behind-the-scenes prep and follow-up work to make your team more effective. The best part is that you get insights on content and training performance so you can make strategic decisions and invest more in what works based on data. Showpad helps your sales and marketing teams spend their time in more productive, high-impact ways with a multiplying effect on your revenue results and growing your pipeline. So to learn more, go to showpad.com/state of medtech. Now, let's get back to the show.
First thing I want to kind of cover is, we have a great industry, but I know of maybe one or two people who literally from birth were like, I'm going into medtech. How did you get into this great industry of ours? And I'm gonna kind of prime you with, every great sales leader I feel like started off at a really good sales organization. You started off over at Kodak before, eventually moving into our space. So tell us about where you grew up and like your personal journey and getting into the medtech space.
Absolutely. So I grew up in upstate New York, so outside of Rochester. So my dad was a Kodak guy. So that was about while there was some imaging and some vet device in Kodak, I can certainly tell you that I would never have guessed that I'd be where I am today when I was younger. So what ended up happening was I grew up there, and then I went to University of Vermont. and was really fortunate to have the opportunity to play basketball there. They've been a good growth stock. That's a good growth stock. When I was there, they were kind of okay, and now they're hitting the tourney every single year. So it gives me a fair amount of street cred, definitely with the AAU team that I used to coach. And when I was getting out, I was looking at a handful of different things, but I deep down, and I think, fundamentally knew that I wanted to get into sales to start. And a lot of it was just based on, I think as an athlete, you're competitive, you like to measure yourself, there's a scoreboard. So the first job that I was looking for was one to get into sales, because I felt it would really gel well with me as a person, and, relationships and building, customer relationships was key. When I was getting out, it was 93, and that's a long time. So I'm kind of dating myself there a little bit over, but it was a tough market, and it was a tough place to go. So, because again, we were in a recession, and so I was targeting companies that had good training programs, right? I was targeting places that, had the opportunity to grow and develop, and I wanted a strong foundation. So starting at Kodak was a great opportunity. And more importantly, I decided to go into the most competitive business you probably could go into, which was copiers. And then in New York City, which is pretty damn competitive too, right? So I had 1st to 5th, 49th to 59th Avenue, and that was my geography. And it was a great experience, because I think what it taught me a lot of things, but, a lot of people talk about grit, perseverance. That teaches you grit and perseverance when you're doing that, because, you are being told no so often, and its ability to iterate, to modify, and to get back on your feet and make a better pitch and really refine your game. And I think as a salesperson, that's constantly what you should be doing, is you should be looking at, how you're delivering the pitch, you're targeting, you're segmenting, and are you delivering the right message to the customer? And that was a great, first intro. After that, I then went into, which go from copiers to industrial equipment. So I was selling large generators and HVAC and compressors. And that was a really cool job, because it was a little bit more, it was a larger sale. There was more dynamics into it. So when, for example, going to a nuclear power plant, and you would air condition a power plant just to give them an extra 2-3 minutes so they could do the shutdown. And it was just a really, really good experience. It was a broader geography as well. So I started to learn how to manage scale. Managing scale is a big piece of it in whatever job and whatever step you take. So it was, and I was up in the New England area, living out of Boston. And so with that, continue to refine. I had a great, I think one of the things that I've been fortunate is have great, leaders and mentors along the way. Under that, I had a great sales leader who really pushed me and took me to a whole nother level. And then I decided to get into pharmaceuticals, and I got into pharmaceuticals. It was going back to the state of Vermont, and that was in the early days of pharmaceuticals too, before the multitude of reps that happened, where you had a little bit more ownership and control of the area. I got into that because I felt like, as much as selling those other products were great, and you'll hear this from many people, when you can impact people's lives and you can impact, patients, that's really powerful. So when you can blend both the business and the competitive piece of it and all the growth that you want to get out of that, but ultimately see that tangible benefit for patients, that's when I was like, okay, healthcare is where I want to be, and this is what I want to do. Did that for a few years, and after that, then I decided to go back in my MBA. So I went to WashU in St. Louis. I was really fortunate to get in there. And when I went to WashU, that's, I looked at a couple different careers and a couple maybe different options. But again, the lure of healthcare just pulled me back. And I think the decision that I made was to go into biotech. So I worked for Amgen, which is out of California. So I don't know if they primarily oncology at the time. And was in
and you had a very interesting background there.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so something about your Amgen years is that, you started Amgen as a sales rep, but then you moved into product management for a couple of years and then went back into sales.
Yeah. Well, the interesting backstory on that, I guess this is what you learn from copiers, right? So I had targeted Amgen because biotech to me was a little bit more forward than more, I guess, quicker paces than pharmaceuticals. So Amgen was on my target list of places to work. And they had told me, so I had applied for an executive development program. So I had gone in and they have an MBA executive development program. And they told me that, hey, we don't take anybody from your school. We don't recruit from your school. And I said, well, you have never met me. You should meet me first before you make that decision. And so I ended up just being highly persistent and got to the right people. And I actually flew out there on my own dime and met with people. I said, just give me a day. let me meet with a few people. And if at the end of the day you think that there's, I'm not a good fit, then we can go. But don't make that judgment just that you don't recruit from there. And ultimately had a really great, obviously, a day, got hired. And that's what led to that opportunity to be in all those different programs. So they had me redo sales. So I felt pretty good about sales, but it was good to get back in and do it with them. And then went out to Amgen and did a number of different roles, which ultimately was the last one was that I did, led a team on our nephrology side. And it was there that I quickly learned the thing that I enjoy most, and the thing I love most is leading people. It was like leading that team and leading a diverse group of people and personalities and styles, and optimizing that to take it to the next level was what it was all about. I mean, it was like I had found the thing that I woke up and was really passionate about. But like all things, Amgen was incredible. Sometimes if I probably could have still been there, but I met my wife and she was in Denver, and I couldn't stay in LA, and she couldn't move from Denver. So at that point, I was at a crossroads, and I think many people who probably listen to the podcast know that careers are defined, oftentimes, well, many times by family. I would actually say a lot of times by family, and you have to make decisions based on that. And ended up going off to ended up looking for different opportunities, and that's where our collective friend there, I got connected with Stryker and a guy named Jim Heath, and I remember today being in Sacramento in an alley on the street, and he finally gave me a call, and we connected, and he was just tremendous. I mean, I'm so grateful that Jim was looking to try to bring in talent from the outside. And also into management, which is a little bit unusual back in 2005, back in Stryker days. That was not the norm. It was usually much more progression from within. And I'm just eternally grateful for Jim taking a chance on me to bring diverse experience, and it really worked well. I think that tested my leadership, which we can talk about if you want. But it certainly tested my leadership in coming into a whole different field, different culture as well, and really pushing what value I bring to a team. And it was just an incredible experience. Did that for a couple of years. Ended up leading on the neurospine ENT, more on the surgical power tool side of the world. So I was in Kalamazoo. I was living in Denver and going back and forth between Denver and Kalamazoo, and had a great experience. And the company is a great company. I think it just as I mentioned before, there's life things that hit. There were some life things that hit that then ended up me needing to be up in northern Idaho, which is probably not the optimal place to be. But to make a long story short, my wife's dad got dragged through a gravel crusher. He's doing fine now. And at that point, I felt it was good to try to do some startup experience. I had in my mind, when you reflect, and I think it's important for people to think about, who you are first and what your strengths are, but also what kind of is the optimal fit, what type of organization. The startup world was very enticing to me. And so did one and then moved over to another one, which was NICO, which was a great neurosurgical device for deep brain tumors and clots, which ultimately then got bought by Stryker, I think 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. But I left before that. But so I did the startup thing for a while, which again got me back. When you're in a startup, you're doing everything, right? And you are knee deep in so much of the process. It was a great experience to get, probably sharpen and hone more of my med device skills and how to get things done within a hospital. But ultimately, my real desire was to get back to a little bit on a broader scale of leading a larger organization beyond just sales, right? I mean, I love sales, but I really did want to lead an organization across multiple functions. And this opportunity at Smith+Nephew came up in 2019. I got hired by Skip Keel. I don't know if you know Skip. He just took over the cardiovascular side. So I knew Skip when I was at Stryker, and took over the trauma and extremities in 2019. And then it progressively just worked, with trauma and extremities. We built it. We had a real strong foundation, took it to the next level. And then about a year ago, they gave me the opportunity to lead all of Global Orthopedics, which includes the joint recon and the robotics side. So it's been a great company. I'm really, really grateful to be here. We have great people, great products. I had, moved from a little bit of a change from North Idaho to Memphis. So that's a little bit of a change, but I felt it was really important to be in the home office. Our home office is headquarters for orthopedics are based here in Memphis. I felt it was really important in order to optimize the team. So that's a little bit about me, maybe a little long-winded, but it's a little about me as a person.
No, it provides a lot of context. And like, something I wanted to ask you is like, you write about this on your LinkedIn, but you've kind of written about the power of harnessing individual experiences to build high performing teams. And I'm wondering, like, in your time at all these different companies, can you share a moment when, let's say, somebody's unique perspective kind of changed how you approached a challenge or maybe made the team better?
Yeah, I think it gets back to, I just, I don't know if there's any specific one that I would say, but I do think what it gets back to is, when you're looking at teams, everybody is, individualization, right? Like what makes them special, what makes them unique. We all have our strengths, and a good one is actually I'm here in the office right now. We have somebody who is really good, again, analytical, good at numbers, good at looking, for us, like inventory, portfolio rationalization. And it was in a marketing role. And I think that, was in more of a customer facing role. And we just decided and felt that, listen, to optimize this person, what was probably best for the business was, to reallocate the team and put this person, more targeted just on that area of the business and take advantage of the skills and the strengths and the talents that individual has. But I think with, I'm constantly looking at that from a marketing team, whether that's on the marketing side. I think, again, on the R&D side is where people's natural strengths and where their interests line, and you want to get them lined up on that, right? And get people in the right spots. I think that, oftentimes you see that between like global and downstream, the upstream, downstream marketing that people talk about. If you put a person who's really oriented to downstream, and while it's a great learning experience for upstream, but sometimes the natural, the requirements of the job sometimes they're just not compatible with how they think, how they're hardwired. So you want to make sure that you're constantly looking at people and putting them in a position to succeed and grow, and build their career as well.
Sometimes it's hard to balance that out with the, let's say the goals of the organization. How do you find a way to sort of tap into each individual's like own personal incentives and align that with the organization? I think that's like one of the sort of art forms of being a leader, which is how do I make sure that this person's incentives for growth and what they want out of their career can align with what we're trying to achieve as a business?
Yeah. So I'll break that into two parts. First off, I think you really got to understand the person and what their goals are, right? I mean, I think you really got to understand them as a human, and what they're willing to do or where they want to go, right? I mean, the reality is, there's some people who have, aspirations and they want to do certain things, but also you got to flex and test that to the level of commitment, and do they know what that will entail, right? So I think first off, personally, my door is always wide open. I'm very approachable. I think if you ask anybody in Memphis, I love when people swing by. I use all of those opportunities as an opportunity to get to know them better as a person. Yeah, I'm interested in what projects and the activities that they're doing. But I'm most interested in them as a person, how they're feeling about the organization, kind of their mindset. Because again, culture is another key component of that. But I think first you got to set with the foundation of, what they personally are all about, and ultimately to what their goals are. I think once you understand that and have a good, clear understanding of that, then I think it's about, watching this and really seeing this in real time. Does it align with what they're thinking, right? So in meetings, do they have certain, core behaviors and traits that then support you, in pushing that person forward? So I think that the bottom line is one is what their own aspirations are and, what they think. And then also really being hardcore, really diligent on talent and really diligent on the behaviors of those individuals. Because if they want to do those things, it's our job is to create an environment that can push and press them, to achieve those goals. So I would break that into two parts.
And, when you look back in your past, I think everybody goes to this point, especially on the sales side, where you go from individual contributor to leader. Would you say that there was a time that you sort of went through sort of a painful lesson that caused you to change for the better as a leader?
A painful, yeah. I mean, I think the hard piece with I think the two or three big challenges with every step you take, and I can personalize even this latest role for me too, but I do think that when you're an individual contributor, your ownership is, it's on you, right? I mean, it's your number, it's your project, it's your development project. It's, so that piece of it, you have very clear metrics that you're defined and that you've got to hit. I think as a leader, when you start to, you have to pull back from that. And really it's about guiding and helping and keeping track and keeping progress, which is, again, I'm used to my own KPIs, right? So when, I was used to, hey, how many calls did I make and what was my close ratio and, numbers and quota and how am I doing and how am I going to hit numbers. And so ultimately you then got to transfer that down to people. And I think as a leader that stresses you a little bit because sometimes people just naturally think, well, this is how I did it. Obviously other people are doing that and that's not always the case, right? So I think when you go from that individual to a leader, that's one aspect. Certainly, I do find that people have a hard time letting go of control a little bit, letting go of control of customers, letting control of relationships. And that was one of the things that it took me some time to get that, but now I'm actually pretty good at that. As long as you got the right people, the more you get up your plate, the better. The biggest thing and again, from individual to leader, I think scale it just ultimately starts to become more and more, right? So let's just take a high performing DOS, right, who does pretty well, and he's managing a group of 10 to 12 sales reps. That's manageable. They're in, they got Memphis, Nashville. This is their crew. They kind of bomb back and forth. To me, where it really starts to press is that scale. Now you've got not just one DOS, you got 8. And then your time management and how you're driving the whole business. That jump is a much bigger jump to do, for example. And the scale and the complexity starts to increase, and with each successive role that continues to build. And I think, personally, again, I'll tell you from like even coming into this role as, in the president role, one of the big adjustments that I personally came from when I was managing trauma and extremities, right? I had my hands around the business pretty well, could spend more time diving in personally and getting, an understanding of it. And while I had a strong team, it wasn't a reflective of that. It's just that the scale of it was pretty manageable. Now coming into this role, for example, with R&D, with ops, with, sales, with marketing, you just don't have the time anymore. And then you get into a different rhythm and cadence, and really counting on the team. And you really, I don't want to say lose control, like you don't know what's going on, but you adjust and you modify. And I think that's, learning how to balance scale, I'll say it many times, that's a big differentiator. And you see it. And, we've had, I've seen it many times in my career where somebody gets into a role and they did really well. People say, hey, just because you're a great salesperson doesn't make you a great sales rep or DOS or sales manager. Sorry, DOS is our term for sales manager. I see it as well when you go from that sales manager to a regional, or an area. I think that's a bigger one where it really catches up. I think it differentiates the good from the great, so to say.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'm wondering also, something that's very unique is that, so at Smith+Nephew, you served as a VP and a GM or general manager, right?
Yeah.
Now you're the president of Global Orthopedics. So like for me, I'm a startup guy. Like a big company for me is like more than 150 people. Like for me, that's a big company, right? And for me, so I'm wondering for you, like for the people who are listening, what's the big differentiator between like what does it mean to be, let's say, a GM versus president of like a global division? Like what are the big differentiators in terms of the skill sets that's needed, and I think more importantly the mindset.
So I think the biggest. So as a GM, I'll take a step back. So the first thing is, when we were a VP GM, when I came on over here, it was certainly more of a commercial function, right? So we were more matrixed, right? So in theory, I had, primarily just sales and marketing, reporting up. And so it was, and then there was a lot of the, ops and R&D and regulatory and everything else. They were more of a matrix standpoint. So one of the big moves that we made, and a credit again to both our CEO Deepak and then John Rogers, our CFO, has been this move to a business unit model, which is everything's aligned under the business unit now. And so, I think that's now everything is reporting up through myself, right? And the decision has to be integrated decision making, right? The things that we do from an R&D perspective have massive implications on manufacturing, on how we serve the customer, through an ops logistics. It has massive financial decisions too, right? In terms of design, and then ultimately, to our sellers and how they're going to sell the product. So when we talk about like what's the difference between the VP GM to a president? I think the president role, the number one thing that I bring, and if you've read this, I think I haven't. I stare at it all the time. Is Barry Conchie's book, Five Talents That Matter. I love that book, and I got to know Barry when I was over at Stryker as well. Is this increasing connectivity, right? I mean, it's about driving the organization and making sure that everybody's connected and we're fully making decisions as a team and as a unit. And I think that's when I think about my role, that is probably the primary thing that I'm doing. Obviously, setting strategy and setting the culture and everything else that goes with it. But I think as a president, it's incumbent upon you to be making integrated decisions where all parties are involved, right? Because each of them, you pull here, you're going to have an opposite reaction potentially in the other way. So, there's never a solution. There's just a balance of trade-offs, right? And so, what frustrates people in organizations is when decisions are made in a silo and then it gets kind of kicked over the other side. And it's like, what the heck? I had no part in this. And so for me, it's just making sure, again, that the organization and this orthopedics business unit is best aligned to tackle the challenges and deliver, again, for our customers and for our surgeons, for shareholders.
Yeah. And, on that note, I was going to say something I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more is that, when you were GM, you were GM a year before COVID and served as GM at Smith+Nephew through COVID. And so I'm wondering, on your end, what did you learn in terms of managing supply chains? And what were some sort of tough lessons learned that obviously put you in a position to be successful moving into the president's role?
Yeah, definitely it was interesting because when I was coming into Smith+Nephew, I think that, it was, and I think it was tough times for most people who are probably listening to this as well in other organizations. It was interesting because coming into this role, I'd probably say ops and manufacturing was, if I were to give which I gave myself self-critique, where do I want to get stronger? I wanted to get stronger on the ops and manufacturing part of the world. So coming into 2019, that was a big piece of me. I feel pretty comfortable on the commercial part, commercial discipline and execution, but that ops and manufacturing piece was really enticing. What I would tell you is COVID put that on steroids, right? I mean, COVID put that at a whole nother level. And a couple things was, if you think about Smith+Nephew, and this gets back at the turnaround, somebody said it that I think it was a really good reference. So Tal's book, Anti-Fragile, right? COVID certainly hit us hard, right? It exposed us in a lot of ways. So it revealed again about SIOP planning, S&OE, SIOP is basically demand planning, manufacturing, forecasting. It exposed a ton of things in our organization a couple years ago. And as a result, I think, organizations have two ways to go. They can either keep following that path and, bad things end up happening, or you collaborate and you work together as a team. You infuse more, new talent, which we did. And I think what ended up happening to us certainly in 21 and 22 was, and that's where trauma in particular got out of the gate. We had supply challenges, right? Our number of threatening texts I was getting from my sales team about, I don't have this product, suck. And, we just kind of stayed focused and really focused on our demand planning and our forecasting, working close to operations and manufacturing. And that was one of the benefits. If you ask me, one of the things that I learned, one of the reason why I came to Memphis was to get close. We build and make a lot of things. The bulk of our stuff is right over. And so I'm pointing over to where our plant is here in Memphis, is that we just got really disciplined. We had really strong partners who came in, and we strengthened that. As a result, I think what that gut punch, that massive punch to us about making the wrong product, making too much of, the wrong things, we got that really stabilized first in trauma. And I think that's a function of being present, being in an office, being in Memphis, I was over at the plant, once a month talking to those guys, just constantly visiting and keeping people going. So we got that stabilized in trauma, pretty quick post. And then most importantly, though, we built the right process and the right behaviors. So now we're stronger as an organization because, when we talk about Smith+Nephew, one of the things that I heard coming in was kind of the unreliability of product and the ability to service customers. Again, I started in sales. I wake up every day too thinking how can we optimize it ultimately for the surgeon and for the patient, right? And so I had heard that a little bit about supply challenges and just the predictability and reliability. And I think we've done an amazing job here as a team. We still got more work to get done, no question about it. But we've done a really good job of working as a team, that we've now got the right systems in place, and how do we refine them? How do we make them better to deliver for our customers? But it was a tremendous learning experience. I mean, it was better than my Washington was a great MBA, but I basically got an MBA on steroids, certainly on the ops front, due to COVID. And it taught you a lot. And um, so you probably can relate to that. So
No, I hear you. I think the best real world MBAs are when you're thrown into an environment that's, everything's going sideways and in a bad market.
Yeah.
Like for me, I started my business at the very, very end of 21, technically 22. And so like I always tell people, I'm like, I have no idea what it's like to be in a great market or great economy. I've only known like extremely tough times. So I'm like looking forward to when, people are just throwing money around left and right. I think I started my business a year too late, because in 2021, at least in the SaaS industry, a boatload of money moved into SaaS, but venture's kind of paying for that. It's a whole other conversation, All right, everyone, quick commercial break. If you're a MedTech CEO/founder, or maybe you're a sales or marketing leader at a startup or a scale up, you're going to want to listen to this. Are you struggling to get in front of your ideal audience, whether that's investors or perhaps clinicians who want to adopt your product? Maybe you're getting ghosted. You send emails and messages and nothing comes back, nothing happens, right? Or worse, nobody knows who you are, right? In business, visibility is everything. And I always tell people, if you want to persuade before persuasion can happen, you have to learn how to get attention. So if your sales team is desperate for traction, clinicians don't know your name, investors have never heard of you, you're losing opportunities every day. And that needs to change now. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. That's where my company, Katib & Co. comes in. We don't just do marketing, we do growth. We figure out how to engineer markets by creating magnetic messaging that makes you impossible to ignore. And we build high impact strategies, of course, using social media, but other channels such as email, text, and others to help turn content and messaging into commercial pipeline, and it leads into closed deals. As an example, we worked with a surgical robotics company in raising a $31 million Series A, and then they needed help on their pre-market release. So we packed their CRM with 198 surgeon leads and nurtured them down. That ended up becoming 4 closed hospitals. 4 hospitals closed and adopted this technology within a period of 6 months, and they got 2 great key opinion leaders in the process. So whether you're a startup founder wearing too many hats, or maybe you have a marketing team that's just spread too thin and they don't have the expertise, my team and I plug in and partner up with your company, and we amplify your reach. From crafting powerful sales scripts to optimizing your team's demo calls, creating content, having it go out on a consistent basis, we transform your outreach into a growth engine. So if you're ready to dominate your market, you're ready to become a known name and people to know of you and take your calls and take your meetings, I want you to act right now. Don't wait anymore, because you've already wasted it plenty of time. Go to growmymedtech.com. That's growmymedtech.com. And I want you to schedule a quick call. My team and I will give you a free analysis with 2 to 3 actionable ideas. There's no strings attached. And if we're a fit, great. We can get partnered up and we can help you go to the next level. And if not, look, the ideas are always free. So do not wait and don't waste any more time. Go to growmymedtech.com right now, and let's make you the go-to name in your niche. Now, let's get back to the episode. I'm wondering also, like, when you're president of Global Orthopedics, because again, it's like there's only a handful of people in those kind of roles in the world at a med device company. Is most of your time spent on thinking about like managing people? Is it on commercial execution? Is it on supply chain ops? Like, I know it's going to be all of the above, but like, where do you feel most of your mind share is being dedicated to? Like, if I got all the presidents of Global Orthopedics, so like Joe Urban, he's the president of the global knee division over at Zimmer. So if I got you all together, what would be the thing you guys talk about first?
So, I mean, for me personally, and it I didn't necessarily answer one part of your question too. It is about talent, right? I mean, it's about making sure you got that is the thing that, for me personally, like that I am constantly thinking about. Do I have the right players in the right spots to get us to where we got to go? So talent is always, culture would be second. But to me, I think you got to create an environment that people have a mission that they feel a part of. I think after that, then you get into, I think there's probably, commercial execution is absolutely, but that's not, for me personally, that's not my day to day, right? I've got a tremendous leader that I brought over from the sports division who came on over about 2 weeks after I joined. I worked well with him. So I don't think about commercial execution because I've got talent that leads that. To me, it's about probably that uniqueness and that differentiation in the market. Right. And in particular, again, with trauma, we've got products coming out. We've had a good pipeline. We've got the right pipeline in place. I would probably shoulder. We're excited about the stemless coming out. We're really bullish about that. To me, it's about how do you innovate and differentiate in this combination of metal and hardware with the enabling technologies, right? And how we show up to customers different.
Yeah, so I want to dig into something. You mentioned the importance of differentiation. I completely agree with you on that. So if you don't mind, let's talk a little robots, okay?
Yep.
In the orthopedic space, there's a lot of different robots. You guys have Cori. What makes Cori different, and how does it stack up against the competition? If you don't mind, sort of diving into that a little bit.
Yeah. No, I think we bought Cori back in 2015 through the Bluebell acquisition. And I think one of the things that we decided while others were going with a larger footprint, right? I mean, we have a very compact, very space friendly equipment. More importantly, too, it's handheld, right? And it gives the surgeon. So we veered a little bit away from what everybody was doing. And I think the market has, rewarded that as well and likes it. I think when you look at our Cori platform, again, it's really flexible. It plays both in the U.S., it plays in the OUS as well, due to footprint, due to the cost piece of it, and ultimately, again, that functionality too. For us, where we want to take this though ultimately is how can we best service the surgeon, right? How can we be of most value to those who want to use a robot, to serve their patients and deliver outcomes. And our goal here, we have a clear path again of what we want to do, both in knees and hips. How to take Cori to the next level. And, a lot of that, you hear from, if you're on Link, you'll see it all the time about workflow efficiency, speed, and ultimately, again, multi-use functionality as well. Right? So getting the robot on shoulder, getting it on hip, getting it on knees is vital for us. But we feel really good. Again, we have over 1,000 units out there. I think the thing that I'm most pleased with as well, so I came from selling capital, right? If selling capital is one thing, getting a box or getting a unit in the facility is one thing. It's how often it's used, right? And so, one is, I think if you look at the number of knees we do by the number of robots, we're certainly punching above our share. But I'm most pleased with the utilization, that thing goes in and people see the use and the value of it. And they're putting their knees in, with it right now, and I think that's what will continue because that's the best indicator. That's the best success measure. And whether or not it's US or OUS, we see the same trends. We see the same adoption curve and getting that up, relative to folks who invest in a Cori to enable robotics.
Yeah, I love that. Just to kind of switch it up a little bit, I have a data question for you. So we have a great partner over at LSI and their trusted market intel team always gives us great data. Big fan of their dashboard. Shameless plug. Let me kind of frame it out for you like this. With for the audience, if you think about Smith+Nephew's Cori surgical system, okay, it's shown double-digit growth since Q1 2025, which is great, and it's part of the company's 3.2% underlying revenue growth in orthopedics. Okay, so given that there's a $1.4 billion orthopedic enabling tech market, okay, where Smith+Nephew's share of that is definitely growing. How is the company going to be leveraging Cori's capabilities to enhance this position in the U.S. market specifically, and particularly as we start seeing the market move towards things like the ASC market?
Yeah. So first off, I saw that LSI. It's great. That guy does great work. His the graph. I saw that graph that went up a while back about the robots. And some discussion about, again, kind of the size of the bubbles and everything else. It was pretty cool to see. I think coming back to your question is, we feel that the footprint, one is optimal for the ASC, right? I mean, you think about time, constraints in OR space, and ultimately, again, when you're going to get a robot, you have to choose. It's not like a hospital again that might have multiple robots in a hospital, right? It's going to come down to, hey, let's pick the robot that we think provides the most value to us. So for us, it's going to be about leveraging that technology. We have Cori on knees. We'll have Cori, from a hip standpoint as well. Shoulder will be coming here as well soon. And we feel really good about as that business migrates and continues to shift, right? You can move. I mean, the beauty of Cori is this big, right? I mean, it's basically, you can move it from tower to tower. You can move it in and out. And we just feel very good about the functionality, the scalability of it. It's image agnostic, right? And so, we have very clear plans of, my team and I have very clear plans of where we want to take this. And it's about, to me, again, about workflow efficiency, using the robot to provide value to, like, it's not about just, hey, I go from manual to a robot, that's just not it. You got to be able to provide something that a surgeon ultimately feels like, they're improving their patient care, that they're improving better out, or having good outcomes for their patient. And ultimately, that's where we'd like to go to, is the data piece of it, right? How can we, again, link all these? You've got great you got great post-op information. Then what happens inside that OR, right? How do you link all that together to give a surgeon and, empower them to be as successful as they can be?
Yeah. And I think, to your point earlier about the importance of not only placing the technology, but how do you drive a change in behavior for adoption and utilization is going to be really key. Can you talk a little bit more on how does Smith+Nephew think about changing behavior and driving that kind of adoption when it comes to these, all these different technologies? Because you have enabling technologies and you have products that work around it.
Yeah, so I think relative to, that's one of the things I've been really pleased, again, from, we talk about commercial execution, and that's always a, commercial rigor, commercial, management. That's always kind of a buzzword, or people toss that out, but it is about changing that mindset at the field, right? And I think it's changing the mindset with our sellers, and getting them active in that. I think when you will have a surgeon naturally who will want a robot and who will want to get one placed, and that's a great piece. But if they do not feel supportive, that case comes up, and technical specialists are fantastic. That's a great way to get up the learning curve. That first 30, 60 days. But it's probably not the most efficient way in the world to do it either, right? I mean, you can't have a technical specialist in every place that you're putting a robot. They're usually traveling. You can run into issues where you got. Yeah, it's from a business model. So, one of the things that, we've been really, pressing through is that training piece, right? Ultimately, if you're going to be in this business long term and you want to have a long term career, you're going to have to learn how to, operate, learn, install, get people up the curve on the robot, because it's here to stay. Everybody leaving, most people leaving fellowship programs, are pretty well versed in robots. They're going to want a robot to perform surgeries. So I think in that learning curve and that transition, we're really pushing again the ownership, at the individual street level, and the training and the to make them more valuable. Also, if I was working with a surgeon, I would want to know everything about that, right? I want to be the greatest value to that surgeon as possible, in every aspect. And one of those is going to be, how well you can navigate and how well you can use the robot in cases, and make sure that they're optimized.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if you can kind of comment a little bit more about that. I know Smith+Nephew has established really interesting partnerships to deliver this, but also like really great education programs. Can you dive into a little bit more detail around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a big piece of it, right? So medical education, and many companies do it. MedEd is a foundation, but we're really pleased and proud of what we can do. First off, from getting, bringing surgeons to, in particular, if we want to do a robotics course or a vision course, we have an ASC course that's going to be coming up later in the year as well. We're really proud that we feel that we provide valuable education that, isn't always just product. It's ultimately like, how can you be a better surgeon, right? And I think that's that real balance, right? I mean, if you've been to them, and, there's nothing worse than when you go to a medical education program and it's just a commercial for the company, right? It's like you want to hear things like you want to walk out of something with one or two pearls that you say, hey, I'm a better surgeon because of that. And I genuinely, we had NACAS, for example, a month or so ago in Arizona, and just consistently we heard people talk about from our speakers, learning something different, thinking through something in a different way. And whether or not that's just plain surgery or if it involves our products, that's fantastic. But we want to make sure that people feel that when they come to a course that they're getting something of real value. And I think, again, those training events, revolve around all of those things, right? I mean, whether or not it's trauma and extremities or whether or not it's hip and knee and robotics, we're really, really dialed in on making sure that we can provide the best. The partnerships too, we've done a number of things. Again, to me, it's, one of the things is obviously with the HopCo, we feel that with the looming problems and with data is going to be key, right? And the ability to provide data, that's going to be key, right? So we've got a partnership out there with them, relative to collecting data for an ASC that may or may not be, in the best position to do that in the next year or two, because it's likely coming that way. And we look at like, all right, beyond just, providing metal and hardware, how can we offer things that will make them more efficient and be of true value? And we're grateful for the partnership there with HopCo. We also think too, probably with data and some things that we can unlock with Cori, as I mentioned earlier, kind of the pre and post, that there's a really good path that we can really go forward with in terms of articulating the value and the benefit that the robot has, for patients. And ultimately for, in what the surgeon's getting done.
Yeah. And I me personally, I was really interested and excited about that HopCo partnership. For those who don't know, HopCo is what it stands for is healthcare outcomes performance company. And so the partnership was around AI, as you mentioned, AI powered analytics and digital health for ASCs. One of their president actually was on our show a few years. I should have him back, but Dr. Wael Barsoom was on the show. Great leader. Oh, yeah. And so it's really exciting to see. I think just last week I was at MD&M to do a keynote about the future of big tech and medtech. And I think that now we live in a world where the sale is more complex, the delivery, the technology is more complex, everything has become more complicated. So this whole concept of I think our industry was really proud in the past of we do XYZ in-house. And now it's so much more important to leverage these partnerships. And so seeing those kind of partnerships between non-med tech companies like HopCo and Smith+Nephew is really exciting to see, actually.
Yeah. And we thought, we actually try to do it internally, right? So we try to do something 5 years ago more internal, right? And I think that one of the things that we like about partnerships is ultimately, and you think about the HopCo part of it, just, it's not for I'm not going to say it's for everyone, but it's for a good segment out there that are looking to get prepared and need more data. What we love about it, again, it's comprehensive across all procedures, right? So it was just, a hip and knee and then, just Smith+Nephew, you're really segmenting yourself into a set of customers. So comprehensive with MSK procedures. And then also it's agnostic, so again, any joint can go in there, so if there's multiple vendors, for example, that's how you build scale at an ASC, right? Is that it's got to be a system that everybody's using for all parties. So we really feel good about it, and we like, again, where we can go with this.
And by the way, I may or may not get in trouble for this, but this is my statement. This is my observation. You don't even have to comment on this, but here's one of the things. This is one of the reasons why I've been watching Smith+Nephew very closely, is that when you look at the global orthopedic market, and again, using our trusted data from the team over at LSI and their dashboard. So when you look at the actual market share for both, if you take spine and orthopedics together, right, 40% of the market is still owned by a variety of different companies, right? And after that, you have divisions between DePuy, Stryker, Zimmer, Globus, Smith+Nephew, Medtronic, right? What I think is very interesting is that I feel of the strategics, everything because of COVID, I think, is starting to move out to the ASCs. Okay, because people just want that. Even these larger hospitals, it's very difficult for them to function as these massive healthcare systems. And to be quite frank, I mean, if I need a procedure, I need anything done, I'm not interested to go to Scripps or UCLA, and I want to go to something. So that being said, as a strategic, I think it's very difficult to service all these ASCs all over the place. I feel like of all the strategic, I feel Smith+Nephew is the best position to do that because the organization is nimble enough to do that. And I feel like you guys are putting the right things in place in terms of the partnerships, the education, and support to actually do that. And so I'm pretty excited to follow you guys along for the next 5 to 10 years. You don't have to comment on that, but like, would you agree that is that a sentiment that you guys have as well?
Yeah, I mean, listen, one is thank you for that, for those comments. And I think, in addition to that too, we've got, think about the sports division that we have. They're a leader in sports and they're in that ASC as well. So it's a really powerful combination. In addition to the strengths of our products and our portfolio, then we've got and that's the benefit of being in a portfolio company, right? You could access sports, you could actually access wound care again, in a host of different ways that would be really valuable to it. I think the second point, which I'll probably contextualize, you're right about the ASC. I mean, I think you may have heard this already. So use that cheesy hair club for men. I'm not only the president, but I'm a client too, right? So
I was waiting for you to bring this up. I didn't want to ask about it.
Nah, you're fine. There's no healthcare privilege or anything like that. There's no patient confidentiality here. When I was looking at it as well, I mean, I went to the ASC to get my hips done, right? And it was incredibly easy. It was incredibly efficient, and just went really well. And that part of it, and it's a belief that I have in our products. I ended up getting our catalyst stem. So I was one of the first 100 patients to get our new catalyst stem, which is really a testament to the design, the quality, R&D, the voice of customer that we did to make this. And then I'm actually the world's first choreographed hip patient. So I ended up being that as well. And then that was in Thanksgiving. And then I got the second one done about two plus months ago. And it's an incredible. Yeah, it's been a very unique experience and journey to, not only now be the president, but also go through the patient experience. And ultimately, we talk a lot about, life unlimited and restoring one's bodies and self-belief. And I can't tell you how much pain I was in for 4+ years. I mean, I just was progressive to the point, like a week before getting surgery, I couldn't even walk through JFK Airport, more than 20 gates. And I'm just grateful to be in this industry. I'm grateful for the surgeon partners that we have, what they do on a day-to-day basis. And I can only say, like, what they've given back to me, and my quality of life, it's unreal. Like, it is unreal, how much better I feel. So it's pretty cool.
I love that. No, I love that.
Yeah.
I love speaking to people who are patients themselves of their own products. I had Uru Minawat, who is the CEO of Profound Medical, and he was a patient, so he had his prostate taken care of using their technology. And, just for context for the listeners, again, using our trusted intel from LSI, right now, based on trajectories and growth, it's estimated that by 2028, about 70% of all joint replacement procedures are estimated to be done in the ASC. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about how you guys are positioned is that the Cori robot is specifically positioned, as a technology for the ASC market in terms of it being a smaller footprint, rapid setup. There's this modular integration. And so I'm really excited to see like how this all kind of goes forward. And I think that one of those big things is that sometimes, like if you look at, let's use the greatest, I think one of the greatest unicorn stories of our industry the last 2 decades is Intuitive. Part of the reason why they went from like, a few $1 billion market cap to now close to a $200 billion market cap is that they were just so well positioned in the market that the market had such strong pull through. And I'm kind of hoping that we see the same thing with Smith+Nephew based on how you guys are positioning the company and more specifically the technologies to service this other market, which you can't just turn a switch and just go and service right away. It's very difficult,
100%. Yeah. And I would probably put that, since if you've got investors or and others that are on the phone here or on the listening in, strategy. But I will end with this: strategy is fantastic, right? It's critical, but execution is far more important. So I think that if I were to say one thing to listeners, we will execute. We will execute, and I think that that's what I am here for, and my team is here for. And we have to execute on our plans. We have to deliver. And I think that we've got our nose down. And I think that's, again, from a Smith+Nephew culture, really, really focused, disciplined execution is what I talk about all the time. Okay, the strategy piece is exciting, is what people love to talk about. But the work gets done by doing this incremental, focused, discipline execution day after day after day. It's our job now, Omar. Now you put the pressure on us, but we've got pressure anyways. That's a privilege, right? But you've said such kind words.
Absolutely.
Now I just got to make sure we deliver for you.
Absolutely. So, and again, I appreciate you spending some time with us. I have a couple more questions before you go. So the last
sure.
data question, because again, we don't get to have somebody who sits at, in your position very often. And I feel like having someone at your level, which is either GM or president, is like the perfect interview, because, we have a CEO on of a public company. They can talk, but it's more high level. It's not like in the trenches. You're kind of in that perfect position where you are dealing with massive global strategy, but then you're also close enough to the field. So it's great to sort of have that perspective from you. So I'm just gonna preface it by saying this: I know you love all your babies. I know you love all the divisions. Okay, but this is a Craig Gaffin question. Okay, so I'll try not to get you in trouble here. Looking at our trusted data coming from LSI, okay, when it comes to the CAGR, or compound annual growth rate, okay, through 2028 for orthopedics as a whole, we're talking about orthopedics and spine combined, it's about 4.2%. When we break that down, okay, we have joint reconstruction at 4.4%, trauma fixation at 5.7%, spine at 3.9%, and other at 2.9%, other being like biologics, etc. Of those, which one are you personally most excited about? I know I'm going to get you in trouble with this, but we got to ask.
It's more the internal teams, because again, it's like I have 3 kids.
You can thread this diplomatically.
Yeah, no. I mean, listen, I think when it comes down to, I'll start first off with like core trauma. We are coming out with our next gen nail. We will have what I believe, and obviously I'm biased, just a super strong portfolio across every segment and to serve customers. So very bullish on that. I love our shoulder. I love what we're going to be able to do, relative to the shoulder, especially with stemless, and then what we can take. We feel that the Cori, which I didn't really expand about, but, Cori, that optimized footprint, but also the burring capabilities, it has real advantages again. We've got a channel between both sports and recon that we can access a lot of surgeons there. But ultimately, listen, we've got cattle stem, which is the direct interior, but which will be a great growth driver for us here. Out of the gate, it's already been. It's ultimately to me the Cori and the differentiator that you can do with that. When I think about, and that, because it goes across 2 of the platforms, both hips, knees, and then I would say shoulder is another one. It goes across those, and it's going to enable what I think is differentiation. And converting customers is really, really hard, right? Change is hard, period. But, changing customer behaviors in orthopedics is really hard. So you have to have a propelling, value prop. And it's not just going to be a knee that does X, Y, or Z. It's going to be a lot more than that. And I think, the enabling technology, that's why people talk about it. That's why it's, again, front and center on all the analyst calls, is that's to me the one is some real potential in our orthopedic franchise.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, thanks for being open-minded to share that and answer that question. And we'll leave you this last easy question, which is, look, especially coming from a sales and commercial background, continuing education, reading is like a big thing. You mentioned one book, but what are some books that you often recommend to people who are coming up through the ranks and moving into positions of leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned, certainly I'm a fan of, I think the 2 books when I was younger, it was First Break All the Rules, right? I mean, that's just a great one as you get into, and I think what's important about that is, in knowing yourself and being really, really kind of self-critical of yourself. I think Barbarians and Bureaucrats was another book that I read that kind of gets into where are you optimized, right? There's certain phases of a business that, like I like the front end. I like the chaos. I like putting the pieces together versus putting the pieces together really, really fast and just getting faster and faster at it. So those are definitely ones, and I think that when it comes to leadership, it's things like Multipliers. If you've read Multipliers, I'm a big believer in that. I thought Barry's book, by the way, just recently, The 5 Talents That Matter, was just fantastic. It's one that I've shared with my team. I think as you get into some of the things outside, the cost of complexity is a really, in orthopedics in particular, this is a hard business. I mean, this is not your straight. I was a generalist before, and the complexity of the number of SKUs, and then also, the logistics and the operations and the inventory and everything else that goes into that. Cost of complexity is one that I would certainly, as people want to venture in a little bit more outside that commercial world and start thinking things more on a global, holistic basis, is a good one.
All really, really good ones, especially, Barbarians to Bureaucrats. I feel like it's a forgotten classic from our industry. Very much worth reading and asking yourself, where on that leadership curve do you actually fall and live?
That's exactly. I mean, I think the key thing in careers, again, is growth. I mean, I think you've got to be in a position where if you're growing, and that's what I press my team. If you don't feel like you have an opportunity to grow, one is, though, you do have to take ownership of it, right? I fundamentally believe your own growth cannot be spoon-fed to you, right? I mean, the great ones go out and seek it. With those growth opportunities, that's the key, right? And we want to continue to get our people in position to grow as people and as leaders. That's a big piece of it. And it kind of gets back to, career aspirations and what they want to do. Good stuff.
Love it. Well, Craig, thank you so much for spending some time coming on the show. For those who are interested, go follow Craig on LinkedIn. He's going to be he posts a lot of great content. And if you enjoyed this episode, if you know an orthopedic surgeon, forward this episode onto them. If you know people who like to follow public markets, forward this on. Again, I'm not a financial advisor, but we provided a lot of interesting data and insight for you to check out. As always, I'm your host, Omar Khatib. Give us 5 stars. Following us online, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.